Hello everybody. Hope you guys can hear me. Everything's good. Wow, 4 people in here and 4 likes. Thank you so much. Welcome back to OW Art Live. This is number 10. I decided we did 2 giant dioramas and I need a little bit of a giant diorama live streaming break. So I thought we would do a specific skill that I know many people could benefit from. It's something that is already out there in the ether, but the way that I employ the skill is a little bit different than you might have seen it before. So I thought it would be a lot of fun to go over how to make hyper realistic looking miniature streets. There is 6 or 7 different ways that I can think of how to do this. But the way that I'm going to show you, I'm going to go over one method in detail today that I believe is probably the most efficient and the most accessible with the best long-term results. There are many other ways that work in different scales as well. If you go bigger, you can adjust these, or there's other ways to do it entirely. And if you go smaller, there's other ways to do it entirely. But this primarily works the best in, I would say, 1/32 scale or 1/36 scale, all the way up to 1/6 and even 1/4 scale. Once you go bigger than that, this method might need to be adjusted. Once you go smaller than that, I would go a different method entirely. But I feel like this is perfect for action figure enthusiasts, toy photographers, and stuff like that. Hey everybody, thanks for joining in. I appreciate the likes as always. So let me show you the results of what I'm going to talk about today. All right. This is something that I made years ago, and I wanted to sell it, but I liked it so much I've kept it, and now it needs a little bit of refurbishing because I mishandled it. But this is what I'm going to show you guys how to do, the street part of this, okay? We'll do the cinder block walls and stuff in future videos, but we're going to focus on this type of street today and how to make this look the way that it looks. All right. And the basics of this are probably a lot easier than you might think. And some of the things you can do to personalize this are, I wouldn't say they're advanced, but a little bit of guidance is always helpful. So we'll go over some of that today. So anyways, we're going to show you how to do this street and this street. It's exactly the same technique, and you can get different results based on what you're trying to do. So, and it's the same materials. And now, I've been made aware over on my Instagram by some people who've watched my diorama supply shopping series that the pink XPS insulation foam is not available at all Home Depots or craft stores like they are in my area. So I now have links, they are affiliate links, in my descriptions. I went through and I stayed up way too late last night, going through and digging through Amazon to find the correct materials at good prices, and I linked them in just about all my major diorama making and live streaming videos to the products that I thought were worth it. So there is a link in this description to get yourself 12 by 12 inch, 1 inch thick or ½ thick XPS foam, as well as a couple of the other materials and some of the tools that I personally use all the time. So if you guys need some of this stuff, there's a link below to get it. It's a way to support the channel. If you haven't subscribed or hit the thumbs up yet, it's something you could do, and I really appreciate it. Either way, you can also go watch my diorama supply shopping videos to see how you can find all this stuff locally as well, if it's available in your area, or if you're somebody who's a homebody, likes to just order things, that's another way to do it. So let's talk about how to make streets. This is, once you see these things, it might shock you how, if you haven't already thought of this method before, it might shock you like, oh wow, I can't believe I didn't think of that. Because that's the way I felt when I discovered this method. And I learned this, I learned these materials and how to use them 7 or 8 years ago. But I've only been using them prolifically for the last 4 or 5 years. My alley diorama, my giant alley diorama that a lot of people have seen, that got my most viewed reel on Instagram, that is the exact same method that we're going to use today that I used on that alley diorama. So with some practice, you guys can make really hyper real looking stuff with the simple stuff we're going to go over today. So anyways, let me see what's going on in the chat here. What's up, Ronan Hobbies? Duffman's Dioramas, how's it going? Star Marvel, thank you for the emojis. I appreciate it, Mr. Mod Podge Fancy there. Let's see what else we got here really quick. All right, thank you guys again for being here. Thank you for the likes, I really appreciate it. And yeah, I've got some 12 by 12 foam pieces here ready to go. I'm gonna put my inspiration piece here, and let me get a figure here. just to show you guys. And if you're one of those people who likes to know how to make stuff, but doesn't want to make it, I have an Etsy store linked below where you can buy, or a store linked below, where you can buy some of this stuff that I've already made. So we'll use Bumblebee here as a stand-in because he looked really good in the photos that I posted on my Instagram advertising what we're doing right now. So enough blabbering. Let me flip the camera around. There we go. All right. So we have our 1-inch thick XPS foam. You can do this. You can do what we're about to do on any base material, okay? As long as you have the right glue, and I'm going to go over that as well. So we're going to do one on XPS foam for the demonstration, but I'll talk about how you can do it on other materials like wood and plastic, just the same. It just depends on the type of glue you're using, all right? And if you haven't already guessed it, the surprise material is cork roll. This is the 1/16 of an inch thick cork roll that is linked below, but you can get this locally as well if you know where to find it. Different types of craft stores have it available. It is way cheaper on Amazon, so that link, just so you know, I cannot find this locally for cheaper than about $17. I think the link that sends you to Amazon is about $10. So it's the same thing. It's the 24 by 48 inches. So if you were to buy just the sheets and just the cork, you would be able to make 8 of these with this material as long as all your cuts were perfect. So let's go ahead and get this open. And there are correct ways to glue this, and there are bad ways to glue this. And so there's some things we're going to go over, and ways of painting this you need to be aware of. If you just dive in like I did when I first started messing with this, I made a lot of mistakes and I ruined a lot of well, not ruined, but I had to redo a lot of dioramas. So I will try to show you guys how not to do those things, even though obviously we have to make some mistakes, right? So cork rolls, I'm going to bring my camera up just a little higher for you guys here. Today, I got a messy shop table. Oh well. All right, who do we got here? Dioforge, thank you for the compliment. I appreciate that. The people who I think are the goats, the people who I look up to are the people who are in the film industry. Those are the people who I've always looked to inform, not so much stylistically, but like inspirationally, how things might be possible. So this is one of those ways here. So we got Bumblebee here in our diorama, and we're going to, these foam pieces are a little bit rough. I banged them up a little bit, but we'll get a cleanest looking one to start. So this is a 12 by 12 piece of foam. You're going to need, for the first way I'm going to show you how to do this, I use this styro glue. There is a link below, again, in the description to get the same glue. It's not the same brand, but it is the same glue chemically. So you can get these 4-ounce bottles on Amazon that it's the same exact chemical formula. It's just not this brand. I like using all different size bottles for all different applications, but that 4-ounce bottle they have is about this big, and I use those all the time when gluing foam together. It is my favorite glue. It glues everything to everything pretty much, and it is amazing for foam. And it is amazing for this method because this cork, as I'm sure you all know, is very porous, and it's also very soft, which is something that'll be important later. But it's very porous, and if you use a glue that is too thin, like a very, very thinned out white glue, or even a Mod Podge, it may not hold this as well as you might think to something like foam. Now, cork on top of wood, that's a little bit different story. I would go maybe the wood glue route, or you can even go the spray glue route. But for foam, I have found through all my experimenting that this clear glue, this clear foam-based glue that also glues a lot of other things, it's called EPS glue. You can, again, that's linked below if you want to get some EPS glue. It's the best for gluing pretty much anything to foam, even though it glues other things to other things. So, fastest way when you're dealing with a small piece, I found, is just to roll the cork out and plop a piece on the cork. So let me make sure you guys can see me here. Yep. So roll the cork out, plop the piece on the cork for small pieces. For larger pieces, you're going to need to roll the cork out, get your big old rulers out, right, and dimensionally snap that all out, cut it out. But easiest way that I found is just literally rolling the cork down and then cutting along the side of the foam. If you are skilled enough with your hand not to cut your foam, or you can get yourself a nice flat metal roller with a cork bottom, mind you, and butt it up to your piece, and then remove your piece and make your cut that way. So maybe I'll do that on the top side here. But for this first cut, I'm going to use a piece of foam just to show you that it is possible. And I'm lining up my first corner with this corner over here so I don't have to do extra trimming when I'm done. Try to utilize all this cork as well as possible without having all kinds of weird little cut-off strip pieces. And it is very important when cutting cork, especially that is this thickness or thicker, because you can get this thicker, we'll talk about that later, to use a sharp blade, okay? Make sure you have a sharp blade, it's not super dull. If you have a dull blade, it'll tear the cork, and when you're doing your edging, you probably don't want torn cork. You can tear the cork to create weathered effects, which we'll go over later, but for you doing your edge cuts, nice sharp knife so you don't tear the cork, always ideal in my opinion. So here we go. And I'm going to do 2 passes because I'm near the foam. I just want to make sure I cut a little bit of a guide into the cork before I push hard. Yep, there we go. So that's cut. I'm going to turn this towards me. And I'm going to put my ruler right here, butt it to the foam, move the foam out of the way, and make a cut with my non-dominant hand. Oh, I have to do 2 cuts. There we go. There it is. That's how easy it is, folks, to cut cork. So this has now got a curl in it. It's got a memory to it. That's something that's very important, and that is why the glue you use is very important. Cork is very stiff, but it is also very brittle, and it wants to reform to the memory that it's been sitting in. Now, you could theoretically cut a bunch of pieces, lay them all down, smash them down with books, leave them alone for a couple of weeks and let them flatten out. But if you're like me and you're a millennial and you don't have time for doing that, you ain't got no time for that, I'll do a few little things here to encourage the cork to flatten out a little bit more. So I will reverse roll it, but very softly, like I'm doing right here, and roll it up, and I'll just kind of go back and forth for a few moments, not very long at all, just to encourage it not to curl up so hard the other way. Be careful not to crack it in half, just a little bit, and there we go. Now it's already laying down a lot more. So this is ideal to help you get it stuck completely to all of the glue. So let me make sure I've got this orientated the way I cut it. Yeah. So very important also with using this glue on the when you're joining any 2 large flat pieces of anything together with this glue specifically, this glue is extremely viscous. You can see it in the bottle. It's very, very thick, and as such, and it's also not a water-based glue, so it doesn't really let air in and out of itself very well when it's drying. And something that I learned with this glue, which is very important for gluing this down the first time correctly without having to tear it up and redo it, if you create a circle of this glue and then you slap something on top of it and you trapped any air that's inside the circle of glue when you put something on top, even if you push it down, the glue will create a vacuum or a reverse pressure system inside the little area of glue, and it will create a bubble and push up on your material while it's drying. I've done that before when I was first figuring out this method with this glue, and I've come back the next day and had my cork glued down really strong, but like bubbles of cork sticking up where air got trapped, and as the glue off-gassed and dried, it pushed the gases of the glue into that vacuum area and created a gas bubble and pushed the cork up. And then you have to like cut open that cork and try to glue it down without messing up the look of everything you've done. So you need to spread this glue nice and evenly, or spread it in a way where it will have escape zones where the off-gassing can go out to the sides, because it won't always come up through the cork. So just a little tip about using this glue so you don't ruin your piece, something to be aware of. So also, if that happens to you, you don't blame me. You know that it's about how you spread the glue. All right, so you can do this both ways. You can do it with it curling up or curling down. I prefer, if it's flatter, I prefer curled down. I've noticed in the past, if I've done it where the sides are curling up and I went to glue it down, if my glue wasn't as even around the edges, even if I put something on it to press it and I come back and I remove my pressing piece off of here, the glue wants to peel up off, or the glue, excuse me, the cork wants to peel up off the edge, and then I won't notice that, and I'll go to pick it up and move it, and I'll crack a piece of cork off, right? So I prefer this as long as it's not curling up too hard, because we don't want to have problems in the middle, but I prefer to glue it down this way, and you're always going to either want to start on the corner or start on an edge, all right? And let me show you a couple of ways to spread this glue that make the most sense. Let me see what the chat's doing really quick before we move on. Nathan Cunningham, thank you for the super chat. Your work is incredible, and the knowledge you drop in these streams and other videos is invaluable for a beginner. Thank you, and keep on keeping on. Thank you, Nathan. You were the man of my week. I appreciate that fine compliment you left on one of my videos. I shared that on my Instagram with everybody because I keep telling people I'm doing lots of stuff over here that they probably want to know, and I don't think some people believe me yet. So I appreciate you very much, man. I thank you for being here. Let's see. So Go Figure Go is asking, could we steam the cork? You could. Like I said, there's a lot of ways you could flatten this cork if you want to be more patient and methodical. But I'm just going to show you the most efficient and the quickest way to do this that works extremely well and you won't have problems with. So we're going over that right now. But you could steam it. You could iron it. Ironing it would work well. Would work well for it. If you put a parchment paper over it. Who else we got in here? Star Marvel says he's messy and he's offended. Well, I'm sorry. We all got to have messy shop tables, right? Just going to have to deal with it, my brother. Off gases. Never even heard of off gases. Yeah, well, chemical formulated stuff, when there's a reaction occurring, and I talked about this with resin in the, what video was that? That was the video where we poured the pool of water into the dinosaur foot. Resins, things that are chemically formulated and not water-based, need to off-gas. They have a chemical reaction where all the molecules combine, they react, they get hard, and part of the process of getting hard in that chemical reaction is the chemical change that occurs and gases come off. And so if you trap those gases, they will make a bubble, you know? So it's just something to be aware of with this. Now, this isn't volatile gases, like, you know, it's not going to harm you if you happen to breathe this or anything like that. This is, you know, obviously you don't want to sniff this like crazy and take the cap off and go nuts. But you don't want, you don't have to worry about this hurting your lungs if that's a concern. I had a few people bring that up to me recently, so don't worry about that. But yes, it can create bubbles. I have experienced this many times. And see that big old air bubble inside this air pocket up here inside the glue? I have turned my glue like this, turned it back like this while the glue is still up here with my cap off, turned away and come back, and in like 5 minutes half the glue has sucked itself out of the bottle, because when you do that it creates like this weird sort of reverse vacuum pressure thing inside of the bottle, and the glue squirts its way out. I've warned a few artists who I've recommended this glue to about that too, and they had the same experience. So make sure the glue is away from here and down in here, mostly pooled down here before you pull your cap off or walk away with the cap off, because you will have a giant mess of glue that you will not be happy that's glued to your mat. I've had that happen 2 or 3 times, mostly on accident. You guys rock. 26 of you here, and I have 18 likes. I appreciate that. I appreciate you guys very much. So let me show you the 2 ways that I spread the glue on this to try to minimize any type of off-gassing that would create an air bubble under the cork, all right? One of them is obvious, one of them is not so obvious. I also use like scrap cardboard or even scrap pieces of foam to spread this glue after I squirt it down, and you'll see what I mean. The more even you spread this glue, the better your cork is going to stick and the longer it's going to last. As long as everything is even and pressed down hard, you should be good to go. Another warning too is this glue becomes tacky and starts to cure pretty quick, like within a few minutes. And the thinner you spread it, like we're going to do on here, the faster it starts to cure and the less time you have to get your cork on. So after you squirt it down, once you start spreading it, you do want to move fairly quick. So, because I actually have literally spread this glue down, spread it, walked away, went to the restroom, got something to drink, took a bite of something, came back, and half the glue was already dry. And I couldn't get this on there. Like it wasn't going to stick to the cork. Like it was still curing, but it wasn't going to stick to the cork. So again, another warning, just be mindful of that. So you can just pop the cap off. And what I do is I'll create channels where I will, and you do want to have glue all the way up to the edge. I wouldn't recommend squirting it right on the edge. because when you go to mush this down, it'll bleed over the edge. I squirt right next to the edge and then spread it to the edge. So I'm going to go ahead and just squirt this out near the edge. And so you can turn right here and come back and create a channel. And turn right here and come back and create a channel, right? Or you could just do lines. Like, here's a line. Here's another line. And that is enough to where it'll create space or natural flow for off-gassing to kind of creep out this way without forcing its way up too much. We are going to spread this out, but there's still going to be some natural up and down from where we initially spread the glue, which will encourage that to kind of go out those channels. And like I said, and I'll do it because I'm going to change it after I do it, but this is what I'm talking about. If you create a circle of glue like this with this glue, and you put the cork down, if it doesn't have a break in it or anything, and it's not spread thin enough, right here it could off gas into the center and bubble up your cork right here. Also, I've come back where I did a circle and I just splatted down my foam and came back, and this glued to this, but it pushed the foam up away from the other piece of foam. And I come back and I have two pieces of foam that have a 1/16 of an inch gap in between them, but they're hard glued to one another. So it off-gassed while it glued, the glue cured and pushed it away from the material. So weird things can happen with this glue if you don't understand how to use it. But once you know how to use it, it is the best glue, hands down, for pink foam, 100%. So it's the EPS glue. I've got a link in the description below for you to get that from Amazon. Or if you want giant bottles, because I use a lot of this, you can go to hwff.com. But, you know, the little small bottles work just fine if you're just doing a project at a time. So I am going to take the cap off. This is how I like to use it. Because it's so thick, it's not going to just pour out. See that? It's not going to come out. You can use that to your advantage and use this like a glue stick. That's how I like to do this. So once I do this, we're going to have to get right into the spreading and put that on just so that nothing cures too much before I get a chance to get the cork on there. So here we go. I will tip this down. I'll let it start to come to the bottom, and I will put just a little bit of pressure on the outside of the bottle, just a little bit. I'll angle the bottle, and I'll just go back and forth like I'm using a glue stick back in elementary school. And if I didn't happen to get all the way close to the edge on one side, I'll go up that edge, and I'll kind of go back and forth until I'm comfortable with it, and then flip it right back over, and I'll let that bubble come to the top like I described before, and then I'll put the cap on. If you don't let that bubble come to the top before you put the cap on and then you take this off, it'll shoot out the top. So now that this is all spread all around, I'm going to just use a scrap piece of foam. You could also use cardboard, and I'm going to spread this as evenly as I can, excuse me, all the way out to the edges here. See, this glue is already starting to cure a little bit, but it's not cured enough to where I'm worried about it. But it didn't want to spread very well because it's been sitting there for a few moments while I've been blabbering away. So you don't have to do this spreading technique if you're doing two pieces of hard foam to one another, because as long as you have those channels for it to off gas. But I do recommend it for this cork, again, because you want as thin of a layer, as thin and even a layer of glue as possible to hold that cork as good as possible to this. And I see a couple of spots that are dry. They're not shiny, where I'm just going to plop a little bit of glue here just so that this stays down. Make sure there isn't any big holes in the middle. And that's probably good. That looks like it's good. So there we go. And this is just like spreading drywall putty around like we've done with our Star Wars dioramas before, just with glue. And this is already getting really tacky. You see that? So another couple of minutes and this would be not usable. So now I recommend you don't have to freak out. Don't get in a rush, but make sure you start to get a corner lined up. Right, get a corner lined up and then start to lay out one of your edges. Just push down like this. All right, and then I recommend flipping to another edge and just following that edge. And the cork is actually a little bit stretchable too, so if you're slightly off in your alignment, you can just pull and it'll probably pull right where you want it to go, within about 1/16 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch. All right, and you'll find out once you start spreading the cork that you're even though you cut it to size, once you start pulling it, it might stretch a little wider. So we might need to trim off some edges. So I'll show you in a second here. So then I just start from where I started and move it, just push outward and hold this in place. Make sure it's pushed evenly. Make sure you're pushing out any air gaps that you might create that you didn't realize you created. And just I make sure those edges are pushed down as good as you can. And this is what I'm talking about. See how we have an overlap here, even though I cut it to size? That's because when I glued this down, the cork stretched just a little bit, and that's fine. That is totally cool. We just need to come back and trim it off. So I'm just gonna push this like that. Just push this down and hold this in place and slice that off. You can also wait until this is dry to do that. You don't have to do it now. I'm just doing it now because I can. There we go. My knife's getting a little bit dull, but that's okay. Okay. And that is basically the gluing process. It's always good to go over it. If you have like a brayer or something that's like a rolling pin, you can go over it with a rolling pin, or even a piece of cardboard tube like this. And you can just, you know, do a little bit of a diorama baking, you know, and get all that stuff worked out. Work out the tensions in the cork. And it is good to kind of put pressure in a few different ways, because like I said, that cork stretches. It's going to want to pull back, even though the glue will hold it. So just kind of doing this a little bit will help the cork kind of plus and minus itself in all different directions with the glue. And that glue, because it's so thick, it will push up into all the little holes in the cork here and kind of grab it as it dries, because the glue does shrink a little bit and expand, or sorry, it doesn't shrink a little bit. It expands just a little bit as it dries. I've noticed just a little bit. It doesn't seem to shrink. It seems to actually expand a hair. And I think that has something to do with the chemical off-gassing process. I'm not a chemist, but that is what I think is going on with it. So you see we have a nice joinery here on our edges. That one's really tight right there. That one's a little up, but that's okay. And we could trim off a little excess here. Now that I rolled that out, it's pushing over here a little bit. I'll go ahead and let that dry. So let's do one more. I'll do it a little bit quicker. I'm going to show you a way you can add detail at this stage with just doing a couple really simple things. Let me see what the chat's saying before we continue. What do we got? Bruce is here. What's going on? Mike Vale 03, what's going on? Oh yeah, you were guessing something on Instagram. I'm sorry, I can't remember what you said, but that was a good guess. That is another way to do this. It's just not this way. Figgy, what is up? Bjorn is here. Hello, Bjorn. Jointery, I like it. Is that what I said? I don't know what I said. Sometimes I say things, and I also am a certified sign language interpreter, and so sometimes my brain like meshes up visual linguistics with regular English linguistics, and I get words come out that aren't words, or like something comes out and it sounded right in my mind, but I completely said it wrong. Like I literally will say a word wrong. So I apologize for when that happens, but that's what my brain does. All right, let's do another one really quick, and I'll show you how to do some detail. I'm actually gonna, and so I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna flip this over right now, and I am going to put some weight on it so that it can cure. And so I use this all the time. This is a really heavy ballast from an old light in my shop. When I took the old lights down because they fried, I pulled these out because they're really heavy. This is probably, it's got to be over 10 pounds, but I use these all the time to hold things in place while they dry. So we'll just plop that on top of that. All right. Actually, I should move this over there. Okay. Get a nice clean piece. That's a good one. All right, same thing here. We'll just, well, let me measure this out. I'll do a measure here so you guys can see a slightly different way to do it. So I'm just going to line it up on my mat at the 6-inch mark. And I know 6 plus 12 equals 18. So we will cut this off at the 18-inch mark. By the way, I have a link, I think, in the video for you guys if you want to get these exact same rulers. They're linked over on Amazon. They are cheaper on Amazon than they are in the store. So just so you know, those are linked below. Boom. Easy cut. And this one, let's see, is this 12 by 12 exactly? Or is it a little off? We are 12 by 12. Nice. Okay. So same thing here. We're just going to reverse roll it. Not very tight, loosely, just so we can encourage it to, you know, change its shape a little bit. Not be so tense. Give the cork a little massage. You know, maybe you could light some candles, drop a little rose petal bath, get it going for it. Make sure it's nice and warm. Tell it you love it. You know, reassure it, buy it some chocolates. Whatever you need to do to get that cork to lay much flatter. See, I just did it. Much flat? That's not a thing. In sign language is a thing, but not in English. Okay. So let's make sure this is gonna fit. Yeah, we got some overlap over here. This piece must be a little bit smaller than 12 by 12. That's okay. So this is where we can be creative. If we want our street to not look like a perfectly flat brand new street, we can start making some crackolas. Some cracks here. So we can literally just tear the cork. So boom. There's one crack. Right? So when we glue this down, there will be a crack formed already in there. So if you glue it down too well, I've actually had this where I've torn a piece and I glued it down and the glue kind of squeezed the pieces back together and I couldn't find the crack that I made. So there's a way that you can, again, add more detail. I'll show you. I'm going to make another crack here just this way, just to add some differentiation. But I'm going to show you here with the cork. The piece that I pulled on has an overhang. So I don't know if you can see that. Let me look in the camera here. The piece that I pulled on has an overhang to it, right? If I were to flip it this way, it's going underneath. This way, it has a little bit of an overbite, and the opposing piece has an underbite. So this one slightly overlaps this with the pieces of cork. That's why when you re-push them together, you can actually disappear the line. Like if you push it together enough right here, and then you add some black paint on top of that, you ain't gonna see that line. So if you pull this apart a little bit, you can see it, or you can carefully, you can get all artistic and creative, and you can take a piece of like this, just a piece of hard PVC sheet that I had cut off, and you can go along your edge and just kind of rough it up, crack off little pieces of cork, give it some randomness, right? Like maybe it cracked away and then it's been driven over a few times, so that when you rejoin them, that crack becomes a little bit more obvious. You go full plumber. Same thing here. So I saw somebody just comment, I apologize, I looked away from the camera, but I saw somebody just comment that they have used adhesive cork sheets before. And I don't use those typically. I have used them before, but I think they only have very specific use cases. They don't stick very well to foam because the adhesive is not designed for that, especially over time. And you might be able to lay that adhesive cork down, but I guarantee you, if it gets hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold, it'll start to peel up. You would need to supplement that glue with another glue. Also, a lot of the adhesive corks have a water-based glue attached to them. And when you go to, and that glue is so weak, when you go to put water-based paint on them, or any type of paint that shrinks as it dries, it might encourage that cork to peel up after that sticky part of the cork has cured and dried, and it peels up, and then you can never get the cork back down. You might have to re-glue the whole thing anyway. So you can be fighting with the paint wanting to peel it this way and the glue wanting to peel it this way, and then the tension just peels it right off your piece. And also, those tend to be very thin. Some of them are thicker, but if you're going to do that, I would recommend actually adding glue to that, or doing it on a hard material, not a soft material like foam. That has been my personal experience. If you have other ways of doing it that work for you, then don't listen to me. But that has just been my experience with trying those things out. You're going to have more layers of trouble to try to sort out as you do that. So Again, I'm trying to go over what I have developed is, in my opinion, the best looking and the most efficient method for getting the best long-lasting results, right? So just so you know why I'm going over this and not those things in this video, that is the reason. So I am just adding my artistic flair here at your leisure so that you can see that crack is a lot more apparent than it was when I first did it, when I abut the pieces. So make sure you orientate these the correct way. Just clean off this. Never fun having little specklies of cork. They won't stick to everything with static. Okay, and then we're going to go back to the gluing process. And, oh, by the way, it's good when you split up your cork pieces, or if you're abutting two pieces, like there was a street repair and you get this piece of cork and this piece of cork and you abut them, like the street was cut up and a pipe was fixed and it laid it back down, which I've done before in my dioramas. It's good to do one piece at a time with the glue instead of trying to do the whole thing and then join the pieces. Your glue might dry while you're trying to fiddle with aligning the pieces. So I am just going to do like this piece first, and I'm going to use my pencil and just demarcate the rough shape of this so I can spread the glue kind of right up and over that edge. Since we're not going to see this when I'm done, we can do that. All right, same thing. I'm going to use it like a glue stick. Down the side. And put that cap back on. Well, didn't follow my own rule. Get the bubble back up there, then put the cap back on. And then get our piece of scraping material. See that? The glue that's on here is already dry now. And we're going to spread this around. Thank you guys for being here again, and thank you for the likes. That's how YouTube knows I'm not over here just wasting my time. Okay, and this thinned out a little bit when I went to spread it, so I'm gonna put some more glue over here. The rest of that looks pretty okay. Okay, now we're gonna put down just this one piece. I'm gonna start with a corner here. Press it down, and this is where you want to try not to stretch your cork if you have aligning, abutting, non-regularly shaped pieces. So if you had two straight lines, this wouldn't matter so much, but since we have this weird curvy thing, you want to try not to stretch the cork. So I'm just, instead of pulling and putting down, I'm just pushing it down here. Not that I wasn't doing that before, but sometimes it stretches no matter what. So, stuck to my thumb. Okay, there is our first piece. And you see how you could easily take this concept and you could in the street there, and then you could take this over to a hot wire cutter, cut along your edge, and then lift it up, and you've got a broken street. Easy, right? Little tip for you there. All right. Same thing over here. Oops, might have been a little bit too much in that area. That's okay, we'll spread it back out. Sometimes it comes out pretty thick. Just gotta spread it back out. Pretty thick layer. That's all right. Thick is good because it'll grip better. And guys, please, if any of the techniques you see me use in this video, you learned from this video, or you learned something new about this technique from this video, and you make a diorama with it, or you make a diorama for sale with it, or whatever, I always appreciate the shout outs. If you tag me on Instagram or YouTube, or even Facebook in your post, preferably on Instagram, that's where I have the most followers, I will absolutely reshare your work on my Instagram story to show people that, hey, again, Oilers Workshop is doing things and people are learning things. So I appreciate that. A lot of you guys have been doing that, and I've been trying to share those. Well, I have been sharing those. I'm not trying. I shouldn't say that. I have been sharing those in my Instagram story. I had a couple of people tag me on Facebook, and I reshared those. Again, I have more followers on Instagram. So if you want that exposure, Instagram is a better place. Facebook, I still am. I still don't really understand Facebook, but I had to get it for my Instagram. So Instagram, I'll be able to share your work with more people over there. So, all right, I'm gonna ignore the edges now, and I'm gonna focus on the crack here, and just align this how I want it, and then make sure my edge is aligned out up here. Just squeezing off the excess. Okay, and then there we go. See that? The cork, I'm stretching it this way a little bit. I'm actually going to lift it back up and stretch it back down because the glue is wanting to pull it back. So we'll get it in the right place. Okay. And playing Lego pieces or puzzle with cork here. Okay. Oops. I'm going to take this piece off. I don't want that hangnail cork there. And then right here. What a cork full day. Nope. All right. Oh wait, I think there's some people that said they didn't like that song. Sorry if you don't like that song. It's ingrained into my head from the ending of Roger Rabbit when I was a kid. All right. There we go. There's a battle damaged street bottom of the diorama. Very, very, very easy to get the basics done. Now the painting and additional modeling and weathering, you can glue down rocks, you can break off pieces of cork and glue them next to the cracks to look like more damage. It's all kinds of things that you can do and get creative with. And I would encourage you to experiment with that. I'm not going to do every little bit of that, but as you saw here on the one that I demonstrated to you, I have used real rocks from outside, real rocks to represent real rocks, who thought, right? And glued them down onto my base here. And I've got some sand in here and some different things. So you can clearly experiment with other pieces of broken cork, sand, rocks, substrate, whatever you want to make your street look more damaged. And before I put some pressure on this, I got a big old overlap here. So save these. If you cut off pieces like this, save these, because you can break these off and use them as rubble. And you can also add them as details, strips on the sides of pieces and all kinds of different things. So these little cutoffs are super useful if you need to fill in things or add rubble to your diorama later. I'm just going to cut this out with my right hand really quick because I'm right-handed. Okay. See, we had a little piece of foam glued to the edge there. That's okay. Again, I have a little drawer full of this stuff that I just pull from when I need a tiny piece of cork. Okay, I'm going to get this one back over here, and I'm going to compress this under these two pieces of foam, and let that sit. See how this one is doing. Let's make sure these edges are staying in place before I mess with the paint. Now, ideally, okay, I'm going to go ahead and paint this with you guys right now just so we can move to the next step. I did not prepare one of these earlier like I meant to. I totally just slipped my mind. I meant to have one of these already dried from yesterday, but I painted them all too quick. They're all in my store down below. What was I going to say? I lost my train of thought. Oh, okay, yeah. So normally, ideally, what you want to do is you want to literally let this dry overnight before you do any painting. So it's just going to have the best chance of the cork not curling up and letting the glue cure correctly without adding another material on top to prevent the glue from off-gassing correctly. So I would normally make a few of these or a large piece of this and just leave it sitting for at least the next morning before I bother to paint it, so this glue has a chance to cure and harden to where it is not going to let go of this. Because you can see if you do a test and you let this dry and harden and you go to peel the cork off, you will just break a little corner off because this is so well gripped to the foam with this glue. It's amazing. So I want to show you, this cork does respond really well to this Gorilla Glue spray adhesive. It's not foam friendly. There are ones that are. This one isn't. I think 303 is a foam friendly spray glue, but because the foam is such a smooth surface and the cork isn't, you're not doing a rough to a rough, you're doing a rough to a smooth. I wouldn't really recommend the spray adhesives for cork to foam, more like foam to foam. It's called 303. It comes in a red can. I do believe I've linked this one below in the description if you'd like to get this. If you don't plan on using the pink foam and you want to glue it to something like wood, this works excellent, but you need to follow the directions. I'll show you. This is what this glue does to the foam, right? So you could use this glue to create, rubble effects in your foam, but it's still a little chemically, so it might not behave well with your paint. But this works well if you want to glue it to cardboard or to wood. Probably not cardboard. I shouldn't say that. I apologize. Wood. I was just sitting there. Wood or other hard materials, even metal. This is just fine. But you know how to follow the instructions because you need to make sure you spray it to both sides. So the side of the cork, the side of the hard material, and you got to wait about a minute, minute and a half, maybe even less, depending on how hot of a room you're doing this in, and make sure that the glue gets tacky on both materials, and then when you join them, they ain't ever coming apart. All right. But I did try this and some other the other 303 and some other glues in the past with cork on foam. I didn't like the results. I felt like it wasn't a very strong bond. So this is good for non-foam cork on non-foam applications. If that was a confusing way to say it, I apologize, but I'm just going off the cuff here, live TV. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and paint this. Now, obviously, you can use whatever paint you want on this, literally. Just keep in mind, if you did try to glue this without the EPS glue and you used like PVA glue, like a white glue, that'll hold it. But when you start to take a water-based paint and you put it on the cork and the water seeps through the cork because cork is porous and touches the water-based glue, it may make the water-based glue release. Again, another reason why we use the EPS glue and not water-based glues for this procedure, because if you're going to use water-based paint with a water-based glue, it might encourage the water-based glue to release if it wasn't a very strong bond. So again, this is the most efficient way with the best results, with the most consistent results, in my opinion, to do this. Okay, so let me get a wet brush, and I do recommend, I have my dirty paint water brushes here, and I recommend a wide brush with a lot of bristles for this first part. And wet brush. I like using a wet brush, not a wash. We're not going to make a wash out of this black paint, but I like using a wet brush because it encourages the paint to just fall into all those little holes and those little spongy like intrusions and protrusions and convex shapes and concave shapes created in the cork. If you just use straight up paint and brush it on, you're going to find at the end you have a lot of little brown spots that are lower than the surface sticking through, and you're going to have to go back over it and back over it and back over it. And as you do that, you're going to delete the detail in the cork because the paint is a certain thickness, right? When you apply it, it's however thousandths of an inch thick when you apply it. And then if you have to apply it again to cover it again and again and again, you do 2, 3, 4 layers of water-based acrylic paint, it's going to start deleting the detail. And if you want to retain the detail, use a wet brush and you can get it covered the first time, okay? Experience talking here, guys. Let me take a look here at what everybody's saying. H Green 1313, what's up, my friend? Who else is here? High School Creations, my buddy. What's going on? High School is making a miniature McDonald's. Somebody had to do it, as I told him. I'm sure we've all wanted to do that, and he is executing one for our community to see. So check out High School Creations. He's got some awesome stuff going on. Let's see. Who else is here? Who else is here? Who else is here? I guess everybody who wants to talk has talked. But I see a lot of you are here, though. All right, let me get back into it. Just wanted to say hi to everybody. I think I got some coffee here still. Yes, I do. Hold on. If I'm not talking fast enough, I'm going to talk faster. If anybody wants to buy me a venti Americano with half and half, that's my drink. I don't drink alcohol anymore because I'm allergic to it, unfortunately. But coffee, tea, kombucha, all about it. So, okay, let me put down some paper towels underneath my mat so that we don't create a giant mess. All right. Well, that wasn't enough, was it? Okay, I got a nice pretty mat. Got to keep it pretty. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little bit of this paint directly on the cork and then get my wet brush and just kind of do it like painting some calligraphy here. Don't need a lot to start. You do, in fact, if you do too much, it might do exactly what I was saying. It might seep in and start deleting detail. But wet brush, here we go. Get it wet a little bit again if you need to help spread the paint around that's now on the brush. You just picked it up by doing that. And I can see that I'm going to need some more paint. I was a little too scared. You don't have to do this directly on the cork either. There's no reason that you have to do this. I'm just doing it because I can. You can put this onto a palette and get your wet brush, dip it in that, bring it over here. Doesn't really matter. Just use, you don't have, again, you can also use spray paint, but this is the most efficient way with the paints that we're all used to. And if you use spray paint and you don't properly prep the sides, you could melt your foam and you could make the cork curl up. So this is just, again, cheap, efficient, works well. So I'm sort of creating a momentary wash, I guess is what I would call it. I didn't make a wash and putting the wash on here because I don't want it to curl the foam up with all that water in the cork because cork is so porous. I want the acrylic from the paint to absorb into the cork. I'm just using a little bit of moisture to encourage that. So I am sort of effectively creating a little bit of a spot wash by using a wet brush. But I'm not actually covering it in a wash, which would mess with the finished product and how well your cork is going to, the longevity of your cork, I guess I should say. The paint is getting empty. I might have to go get another black paint. I got a little bit of green paint in my dirty paint water there. That's okay. That will add to the naturalness of the weathering of the street because moss and stuff and dirt and wetness gets into streets, right? So there's also green in a lot of black paints that helps pigment it all the way to black. So I ain't worried about that. Again, if you like to observe stuff like this, but you're not a maker, you're more of a collector, I do have links down below to my shop if you want to buy one of these pieces from me. I've priced them what I think was is affordable for the scales that they would work well in, and for the size the pieces are. I did a few of these this week just to try a few other ideas I had and test a few other things. So those are for sale in my shop down below if you want, or if you're a doer, now you know how to do this. I try to make sure when I do pre-made items or pre-made pieces that are not commissions, I price them in a way that reflects close to the amount of hours and time anyone would have to put in them, plus materials, to make sure that the price is fair and reasonable. So just know that when you go there, that's what my prices are based on. They're based on time I would put into it and the collective price of materials, with a little bit of price because of my, experience and skill, but I try to make these things as accessible as possible, which is why I'm showing you guys how to do it too, and not just, treating it like a little my precious and not showing anybody, because that's no fun, right? So my philosophy, like I said on previous live streams, is I can't make everybody's diorama for a price they can afford, but I can show you how to do it yourself if you have the time. And if you don't, well, then you can buy one, or not, or whatever. So that's all I have to say about that. So you see how this is getting a nice even coat. As it dries too, I'm seeing a couple little spots. I'm just going back and tapping the corner of my brush into those spots because they're low spots, most likely. And I'm just re-wetting the brush because I have enough paint on here, I can tell, for the most part right now. So I'm just re-wetting the brush to encourage that paint to spread a little bit thinner without becoming a wash. Dabbing is also good because your bristles will just get right into those little crevices and cracks. And to be honest, an imperfect coating, not a really imperfect coating, but a slightly imperfect coating of base coat black will actually look more realistic because you get dirt and you get silt, right? That dusts over onto streets or that builds up on streets. And so if you make it perfectly black, it's going to literally look like the construction crew came through and laid it like within the last hour. And you might want that for your piece. You might be doing a piece where that is the look you're going for. But I know most people are going to want it to look a little bit more natural, a little bit more normal and typical. So having a little bit of variation in your thicknesses of paint and having it dry and having some browns show through, I would say leave it. And then add your weathering on top of that. And as you layer in your weathering and things, the street will actually look slightly more real because you will see layers of very, very subtle subconscious colors of the browns coming through from the cork and unevennesses of the black, which will really emulate how real street looks. You know, it's a good way to do it without having to redo it later. Like if you make it a perfect black and then come back and try to re-weather it later with browns and brown washes, which we're going to do some of, but this will add just another layer, like not freaking out basically about how uneven it might look when it's dry is something that can be used to your advantage rather than a concern or thinking that you didn't put the paint on good enough. Like, don't think that way. Think about, that looks a little off. Can I make that a weathering layer? You know, can I leave that alone and consider it weathering? Sometimes that is like sort of a happy accident that happens when I make dioramas. I'm like, that didn't turn out how I wanted, but it actually looks slightly more real if I leave it alone, you know. Instead of trying to make it perfect, it being slightly imperfect makes it look more real or hyper real, which is what we're going for here. Because hyper real to me means way more detail, way more painting, way more weathering, and lots of subtlety. So allowing that subtlety to come through in the unevenness of the paint, in the unevenness of the cork, in the drying process, in the thinness of washes and stuff, that will all inform the hyper reality, the hyper realism coming through. The more details that other people may not know you did, but you know you did, will start to layer in and make things look just that much more real. And you can see here all the different texture undulation and lighting that's occurring as this paint is starting to cure. You can see all the textural details here. And that's why cork is so excellent for all those different scales, because it provides an insane amount of subtle detail that makes it appear real. Just like real asphalt, right? They put it in the machine. If any of you here work on construction and do any of that street laying, you would know and you would be able to describe it better than me. But basically you're mixing a tar type of material with a rock type of material, and then you're pressing it down. And so you're getting small little pieces of substrate glued together and heat pressed down. That's literally what cork is, right? Cork is all kinds of tiny pieces of natural material, like a substrate mixed with glue, right? And then heat pressed into a flat form. This incidentally is constructed from an engineering perspective the exact same way an actual street is constructed. It's just not rock and tar and asphalt. It's, you know, natural tree bark and, you know, glue. So we're just taking advantage of what we already have to put that detail in here. And there, you'd be surprised how many materials, when you start thinking in terms of that, you can discover that you can use the way they are and just paint them differently or apply them differently. That already creates effects for you. I know there's companies out there that make like vats of street that you spread, and that actually looks beautiful, but I think that is something that needs to be targeted. You know, if you want to use that, use it on a very specific piece that you want to look a specific way in a very specific area, right? So I wouldn't say use it for everything unless that's your thing and you really like it. But this is the type of thing that works on all different types of mediums and surfaces that you can adjust and change and weather and make look all kinds of different ways. But some of those other mediums out there only allow you to make it look one way, and to try to get other effects out of it is difficult. But this is very, very versatile. So if you start thinking in terms of what is already made the way it is that I can repurpose and just adjust or paint differently that might look the way I want it to look in terms of texture or modeling, you'd be surprised the kind of things that you think of and realize you never thought of before, but they were already there for you to use. So I hope all my blabbling is helping this dry quicker. That's what I'm trying to do. I feel like the more I talk, the quicker it's going to dry. Let me take a sip of my coffee here. Almost there. Let me get my can of keyboard duster. Maybe I can encourage it to... Nope, that was cold air. Didn't mean to do that. Almost there. All right, what's the chat saying? What's going on, guys? 42 likes. You guys are amazing. Let's see. Let's see. Let me go back here. Steve Morrow just bought his first 2-foot by 2-foot foam to start on my first dio. Congratulations! Hashtag Dioramaverse. Good job, Steve. You have joined the Dioramaverse. Star Marvel cannot wait to get back on his piece. Heck yeah. H Green 1313. Hey, you're welcome, man, for the inspiration. I appreciate all the inspiration I get from everybody as well. Let's see. Star Marvel says, I think I take a bit of tips from every video that I do on this one dio I got, so prepare to be spammed on Instagram. Sounds good, man. I'll share. I mean, if you literally spamming me, I don't know if I can share all of it, but I'll share as much as I can in my story that's, you know, that makes sense, not to clog up the feed for you or anybody else. Nathan asks, how long have you been making dios? Did you start because you were interested in crafting or because you were a collector looking to upgrade your own display? Neither, actually, Nathan. I know a lot of people come in from those two directions, but growing up, I was inspired by miniatures in films. The first time I watched Star Wars, I mean, I always tell this story like this. There's other factors that influenced this, but the most significant one was when I was 7 years old, playing with Legos on my friend's living room floor, summer break, and my mom put on Star Wars for the first time. I had never seen it. I think I didn't get been playing in the background, but I was too young to care, and I was out running around in the yard with my friends and never actually sat down and watched it. But because I was sitting on the living room floor playing with Legos, my mom put it on, and I was watching it, playing with Legos, and it ended. And I watched all three films. They were original 1983 VHSs, which I have sitting over here on my counter. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I was like, Mom, how come you've never shown this to me before? And then my mother explained to me that everything in that film was miniature. It was handmade by somebody. And that clicked in my brain. I was like, wait a minute, somebody made all that? Like, that was all not really, you know, obviously you're 7, so you have a certain sense of not realizing that things are fake and or not knowing that they're not real in certain ways, right? So my brain was like, wait a minute, what? It's not real? They didn't actually film this in outer space in a galaxy far, far away? And it just clicked forever in my brain that somebody made that. Somebody made that AT-AT. Somebody made that Star Destroyer. Somebody made that Death Star. Somebody made that X-Wing. Somebody made that Dagobah set. And I was like, that means I can do that. That means I could look at things and I could figure out how to make things with other things. And so my entire life, I have thought that way about materials and toys and things. I mean, we'd be walking through Savers or Goodwill when I was a kid, and my mom would be looking for like a new dress or something. And I would run over to the toy aisle and I'd bring all these broken toys back and be like, look, Mom, I could turn this into this and I could make this out of this. And she'd be like, what are you talking about? Right. And I'd be like, but I could do it, but I could never buy those things. So my whole life, I've always been thinking about making things out of other things as a result of that, really that moment. And almost my entire artistic creative journey, whether it was a hobby or some things I learned in school, like I focused on architecture and drafting when I was in school. Found out wasn't really the career path I wanted, but I liked the artistic aspect of it. I brought that into my hobby life, my hobby world. So my whole life has been thinking about things in terms like that. And now as an adult, now that I have a workspace that I can work in and a small business that I've run that has helped me acquire some tools and not so much anymore, but in the past, some cash to get sort of the startup that I needed for this stuff, it's allowed me to kind of get a flow going. And for the last decade, I've been trying to do all these things that I've wanted to do since I was a kid that I never had the space to do, the tools to do, or could afford to do. But now that I have access to those things, I'm just trying everything I've always wanted to try, learning what I can, combining ideas, and going crazy. So that is why I do dioramas and I make miniatures. Really stem from my love of film, mostly from Star Wars, but then I got into all kinds of other films and things like that. 2001 Space Odyssey, Jurassic Park. I love set design. Like, I'm never the guy who wants to necessarily be the recreator. This is almost dry, by the way. I'll keep talking for another minute. I'm never the guy who wants to necessarily be the recreator. And what I mean by that is there's people out there who are amazing and recreating set pieces from specific films in diorama or miniature or in life size. People who recreate Luke's lightsaber from that one scene that was cut from Return of the Jedi where he's assembling his saber. They want to make that. I love that stuff, and I have nothing but respect for all that. But I am more interested in being the guy that designed the lightsaber, or being the guy that designed the set, or designed the Endor Imperial base that we have to infiltrate. I like to be the creative, not so much the recreator. That's just where my brain goes. Like every time I start trying to recreate something, I want to change it. I'm like, it would be cool if I could do this with this and move this over here and do that. And then I get lost and so every time somebody asks me to replicate something, I have a hard time doing it because I want to start doing my own thing. And so this outlet specifically, miniatures, dioramas, has been an amazing outlet for me as a creative person to just try all the ideas I've had. And so that's where I'm coming from with a lot of the things I do. Like there are things that you see in my work that you might go, oh, that reminds me of this or reminds me of that, but it's like my take on it or my version of it. I don't do so much recreating as I do just trying to create. So the people that I like in the film industry that I look up to, like Doug Chang and Joe Johnston, and Luc Besson, the people that created their own worlds out of their own minds. I love Ralph McQuarrie. I love I love all those guys. I love what they do. And so that's always where I'm coming from, is this headspace of wanting to create something new with things that I've learned and compile them into a fresh idea. And sometimes I will do things as studies to help inform what I can do later. Like this piece, this was kind of a study. I don't want to, there's plenty of artists out there who make beautiful vignette dioramas like this. There's literally thousands of artists who do a beautiful job, who make vignettes and scenes and slices of buildings. And while I love doing that, that's not necessarily the art I want to make all the time. I want to make my own new things that are original to where I'm coming from in my headspace as an artist or a creative. And so I do these as studies to learn how to do this, how to do that, how to do this, how to paint that, how to do this, how do I attach it to a base, and then take all the things I learned and then move on to the next thing and do something hopefully totally different or a variation on this. Instead of just making the same thing over and over and over again and recreating something I made, I like to just create new things all the time. So that's why you don't see a bunch of things constantly for sale in my feed, because I like to move on to the next crazy thing. So anyways, that's my rant about where I'm coming from as an artist and why I do what I do. And this, it's dry enough for us to move on to the next step. So let's paint some lines in this. And it's quite easy to do. Oh, didn't have my cap on my paint. Why didn't you guys warn me? Didn't have my cap on my paint there. So for doing lines on this, whether you're doing street lines or parking lines or space lines or whatever you're going to do, you definitely want to use a masking tape, but you want to use one of those light duty masking tapes. This is one of the ones that it's a very, very soft adhesive that is intended not to hurt your surfaces. I think I have another one over here too. Let me grab it. Box of tape over here. Okay, so these are also non-marring tapes. These are the frog tapes. This is a Scotch brand one. They all do the same basic thing, but they are different stickinesses. Excuse me, I guess is the word you could say. I'm using this one right now. It's a new one, so I'm getting used to it. I like this one a lot, and I also like this one for working on the cork. The green frog tape, I wouldn't actually recommend for painting lines on cork to mask off lines and areas, because I've found with the green frog tape, it is slightly stickier than the yellow frog tape, which is supposed to be. It's still considered light duty masking tape, but because it is just at that perfect level of sticky where if you put it on your cork that's got the paint on it, I've gone to peel it up and it's peeled up some of the black paint on my base, or it's even peeled up some of the cork if I've left it there too long. So I don't recommend the green frog tape, but the yellow seems to work just fine, and the this purple Scotch one works great. I've been using this on all these pieces that you saw me show you earlier. I've been using that on these to do these lines. So this stuff works fine. We'll go ahead and use this. It's also the same color as the foam, which is interesting, or pretty close to the same color. I had put some on a piece of foam to paint last week, and I was like, hey, where'd the tape I put on there go? I thought I put tape on there, and then I had to move it in the light to find where I put the tape line. Anyways, I find for different scales too, these lines, the the lineage or line work here. I'm going to go ahead and go with 1/12 scale for this. For 1/12 scale, either a 3/16 or a half an inch thick wide line seems to be the right scale for these spray painted lines that you get from the vehicles that go down the road and spray the lines. Either 3/16 or half an inch, somewhere right in there. Any bigger, and you can go bigger. I have some like those I did over there are a little bit bigger just because I wanted them to be a little bit more bold in that piece. But if you go bigger than about I would say 5/8 of an inch. Any bigger than that, it's going to move up into like the 1/10, the 1/7, and the 1/6 scale stuff. So for 1/18 and 1/12 scale, 3/16 or half an inch is about the right line size, in my opinion. But you know, do what you want for your piece. So I'm just going to do. Let's see. Let's just do a simple yellow line over here to start. So I'm just going to use this piece of tape as my guide for making it straight. And because this is still drying, when I peel this up, it might peel a little bit of paint with it, but we can touch that up later. If you let this dry completely and cure, probably wouldn't have that problem. And grab another piece of tape, and I'm just going to eyeball this because I'm so used to dealing with small measurements. And then I'll pull my ruler out to prove it to you. If you need to pull your ruler out, you can do that. I'm just so used to doing small measurements that I can tell what a half inch 3/16 is going to be. So that is... It is exactly 3/16 and 1/32, and that is 3/16 and 1/32. So good to go. See what I mean? You work in small dimensions a lot. You get used to just kind of eyeballing them. Once I go bigger than about an inch, that's when I get the ruler out. But smaller than an inch, I've gotten used to, you know, an 1/8, a 1/16, a quarter, half inch. And what I like to do on these, and this is just my personal thing, I will usually use 2 tones of yellow if I'm going to do this. I feel like it just makes it look like there's a certain tonality that comes from using 2 tones of yellow that I feel looks more real to me. It's not, you don't necessarily notice it if you don't know I did it, but to me, it just looks a little more real. You don't have to do this unit. You can just use this nice, like bright yellow, goldish bright yellow here, and it'll look just fine. But I find doing the light color first and then doing the solid color under it makes it almost look like the line was painted over again and the previous line had faded. It just feels a little bit more real to me. And you can brush this on if you want. If you wanted to go crazy, you got an airbrush, you can put your airbrush paint in, airbrush your line on as well. If you want to get that sort of overspray lineage work happening, you can take the tape off, run your line if you've got a steady hand and get the overspray look. But in my opinion, at this smaller scale, you don't have to worry too much about having that overspray look. It seems to look just fine without it. So let me just shut up and get this going here. All right, I'm going to take this brush and clean it off here. Again, if you don't have access to get the stuff easily locally, or you don't want to fork over the 20-something bucks that these rolls are in stores locally like they are for me, there's a link below to get the cork, to get the foam, to get my knife, to get my ruler, and to get the paint. And I think a couple other things in there too that if you're not equipped, you can get yourself equipped for good prices. And if you have an Amazon account, you get free shipping. So it might actually be cheaper for you guys to order it online than it is to get it. I'm finding things now that I'm starting to order more online instead of get out in the field. I still get a lot of my large sheets. I still get all of my large sheets of foam at Home Depot, but I've been buying these packs of these 12 by 12 pieces off Amazon because they're already perfectly cut. I don't have to break down the large sheet of foam to get my 12 by 12 piece to make smaller dioramas or prop pieces that I need that are that small. I don't have to get a 2 by 2 sheet or a 4 by 8 sheet and break it down. So these are nice to have pre-cut at that smaller size if you're going to be doing smaller things. So just a reminder. So this one I am going to use a palette. And you can see where I already did this the other day. And we're going to do the light yellow. And I'm just going to plop them both down right now so they're ready to go. Come on. You can do it, little paint. It's whining at me. Okay, let's try that again. There we go. Okay, my brush is clean, and we're just going to go ahead and load it up. Tap, 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 tap. Bob Ross style. You guys can't see it. Tap, 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 tap. and we're just gonna paint it on. And I recommend too, don't go super thick. Put it on like it's a heavy dry brush, right? Don't just paint it a super solid thick line like we did this black. Just do it like it's a heavy dry brush. So you see how you still got some black showing through? You know, and you'll learn what you like as you do it. This is, you know, again, you don't have to do this. This is my way. You know, if you want the line to be lighter, thicker, different color, do your thing. But this is just what I like to do for a generic yellow line in a street. So just do it like it's a heavy dry brush. Right? So there's still black showing through. I feel like it makes it look, again, like slightly weathered already. And we'll clean that off. Beat the devil out of it. No. I wish I had a paint bucket to do that with and I could make a mess like Bob, but I don't. Okay, now we're going to get that gold, really bright, you know, street yellow. Because this, I feel like, again, this makes it look like there's a faded layer underneath it. Yeah. And we'll just encourage that not to mix too much with this. Do the same thing. And don't be afraid to layer this layer on thick. And I found that to fill it in, sometimes I'll go sideways like this to get it nice and thickly filled in, densely filled in, that's the word I'm looking for. Densely filled in, and then I'll come back and do the brush stroke the long way, because if you do all your brush strokes this way, it will, you could peel it off and the subconscious mind might look at that and go, that's not real, right? Because we're trying to lean into the hyper realism here. So if we do all of our brush strokes horizontally, the subconscious mind knows that streets are not painted like that, or at least in most parts of America, streets are not painted like that. I don't know if your home country, if that's, you know, different for here where you're at. Maybe they are hand painted. I know some places they are. But I'll do this way and see how it's inconsistent. I'm doing that on purpose. Again, adding to the naturalness of it. And if I want to touch it up later, I can touch it up later. So then I'm just going to do the brush strokes this way to encourage a visual direction that the paint was laid down like that. And those lines are a little bit too hard, so I'm going to just lightly go over it. Those brush strokes were a little bit too hard in there. So now there's a visual cue making the mind think the line was done this way, right? If all those brush strokes were this way, it wouldn't look right. But now that they're this way, even though it's not sprayed and it's brushed on, it'll help inform the subconscious mind to think, oh, that's a real line. And when I get down in there and put it out in the natural sunlight and take a picture, it will help the mind not second guess what it's looking at, thus making it slightly more hyper-real. And it is good to peel the tape off before your paint is dry, because you don't want the tape to dry to the paint. And when you peel the tape off, the tape peels the paint off, right? So while the paint is wet, peel it off. And you are going to get natural bleeding of the paint under the tape a little bit, but that, I think, makes it look more real. Boom. There is your Lello line. Right? And you see you've got little bleeding over here and over there. I don't even worry about that. And you've got the streaks in there that kind of help it look like it was laid down this way. And you could come back and you could, after the, I would wait till this dries and add in another like layer of that gold yellow to make it look stronger. Or you could brush some like brown and white or some wet washes, some brown and white washes over this and wipe it off to make it look like it's been stepped on or driven over by tires or whatever. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the washing stage over here while this starts to cure so I don't mess with that. But that's how easy it is to do a line. And of course you could do parking lines like that. You just got to kind of figure out your angles. I would recommend something like a T-square. In the past, I've laid down a whole sheet of tape and sketched on the tape my lines and then gotten a razor blade, like my knife here, and cut out and peeled off where I want to paint it over, and then peel that whole thing off, and you get your parking lines, right? So there's all kinds of little tricks you can use with masking tape, a ruler, an X-Acto knife, drying it out, getting the lines how you want. Or you can do them one at a time. Sometimes it's good to do that so you don't mess up, and if you cut too deep through your tape, you could put little cut lines in your cork. So there's all kinds of things. I would just encourage you guys to experiment. You'll find your own ways that you like, but this is, again, the basics here to get your work leaning into that more hyper-real state here. So the next thing we can do is, well, I should keep my palette over here. Next thing we can do, is that cured enough? Yeah, okay, I don't want my palette to stick to the cork. So now, again, we're going to go back to that wet brushing, which I use all the time. I'm going to put some burnt umber here. I saw a funny joke. It says, put a picture of burnt umber and raw umber next to each other, and it said, how come no one knows how to cook umber? Anyways, little diorama humor for you. So this brush is really stick with black paint still, but I want to use this brush. Actually, I don't want to use this brush. Take it back. I'm going to use a chip brush. Chip brushes are better for this type of weathering on this type of material. Let me get a chip brush. I'll be right back. Here we go. This is a chip brush. So these are excellent for doing uneven spreads of weathering, and even like light dry brushing. If you don't load the paint too heavily on this, these are good for that. I use these all the time, and they're cheap. I love cheap brushes. I love them. Everyone says, no, get expensive brushes. Well, depends on what you're doing. For this, cheap brushes work great. What's the chat saying? All right. So Star Marvel says blue tape is easy to find. I don't recommend blue tape on cork. Other things, it's fine. Blue tape is actually quite strong. Blue tape is leaning more into this green tape. Let me show you real quick before I move on. This tape. It comes in a clear case. There's a little clear case, and this is what the lid looks like for that yellow tape. All right. The purple tape looks just like this, but it's got a wrapper around it. You can just pick it up off the shelf. So this purple Scotch tape, this is the number 2080. That's the tape, okay? Maybe I'll link this below afterwards for an Amazon link to this tape. And then this frog tape, the yellow frog tape by Frog Tape. These I'd recommend for the cork because they won't pull up the paint or the cork as long as your paint is cured. Now, I was kind of cheating a little bit there just because I didn't push this down as hard into the cork as I would if I had let this cure and then paint my line. So just be aware of that. All right, so now I am going to wet my brush, my chip brush, and I am wetting it in my dirty paint water. That's on purpose because it adds another layer of weathering. It's not black, it's just dirty paint water. And now I'm going to get some of my umber, some of my improperly cooked umber, and we're just going to kind of lightly, you don't want to go too crazy because you don't want to look like splats of poop, right? Because if you take umber and you go splat, 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 it looks like somebody threw poop on the street, right? So this is where you could do all kinds of things, right? So you could, I'll just go over here. I'm imagining the sidewalk is over here maybe. I'm just going to just going to dab this wet burnt umber mixed with dirty paint water. And again, you don't have to use dirty paint water. You can just use regular water and thin it out and make a wash. That's the traditional way. I'm just so used to using this that I've become accustomed to layering my stuff with that in mind subconsciously. But you can just start with a regular wash that's already mixed or make your own with some paint. And it doesn't have to be burnt umber. It could be nutmeg or it can be poopy brown, whatever you want to use. It doesn't matter. So, and again, you may not see anything happening over here, but once it's dry and you light it, you take it out into the sun, it's going to look a lot more real than just black, right? So, and here I'm just going to basically, I'm going to imagine water running through the streets, right? Maybe there was a rainstorm and I got to kind of imagine if it flowed this way, you know, which direction is it coming from? There you go. Put a little bit more brown in there. Came from this way and it ran this way and it went over here, right? And I'm just trying to, I'm not trying to create a line. I'm trying to create an area and then blend that area out, right? Like Mr. Bob Ross says, a hair and some air, right? We're doing that basic idea, but on cork here, where we're just dabbing or stippling it outwards to create the indication of where dirt or sediment or silt washed out into the street and then dried, right? So we've got a little bit of a shape going on here. Get my brush wet again. Get some more of my improperly cooked umber. Maybe start in this corner. Go up this edge. Merge it with where this came. Right, maybe it pooled over here and ran down here, or pooled over here and came over where they pooled and the pools merged. Right? Imagine what water would be doing dirty water came up from the sewer. Maybe it was flooding one year. And then I'm going to just do a little bit of a cross over here on the yellow. And I'm pushing less hard when I want it to be more subtle, and then harder when I want it to be more subtle. Oops, I actually brought a little bit of yellow over. My bad, that's okay. We can just get some water and blend it back out. So if you've got wet paint and you mixed a color you didn't want, you can get your brush wet and just blend the color out, mush it out into your diorama, and it will add to the weathering of it. Yeah, I like it. One thing that happens with these cheap brushes, bristles do come off and fall into your diorama. Just brush them off, you know, or pick them up and plop them off, or even when they're dried, you can peel them off. I just like using cheap brushes because I actually get better paint effects with cheap brushes. Sometimes the more expensive brushes, they don't give me good effects. And I have to maintain them, so it's more time dealing with the brushes. So, and instead of paying, you know, $13 for a brush I have to keep cleaning, that may not give me the effect I want, I'd rather pay 59 cents for a brush that I can reuse for a few months, throw away, get a new one. It's just more, it's worth it for me to do it that way than any other way because of the way I've learned to do it or figured out how to do it. So you guys see there's just, it's very, I don't know if the camera really shows, but there's just very subtle differences happening now. So now I'm going to do the same thing with nutmeg. I'm going to take some of this nutmeg out of here, put it on my palette, and make a little bit of a mushy wash here and move some of this nutmeg around the diorama. And maybe we'll do some more of this. Maybe this is where the silt's got a little bit heavier in this corner down here, and so you're seeing a little bit more of it. And over here where it started, we'll add a lighter color to where the dripping began. And down in here. And I feel like that's doesn't need too much more than that. Then something you can do, you can also do the same thing with grays. So this is just granite gray. You can use whatever gray you want. This is just the one I happen to grab. I'm not doing this on purpose. It's just, you know, just to show you can do this with grays as well. So get some water, thin out the gray. And this is where you want to be subtle when you go into the grays because it's going to contrast really hard against your black. So when you go into the grays, be very subtle. Yeah, you can see like there's already this brightness going on. It's going to tone down as it starts to dry, but this is where you can start giving indications of a weathered street, like it's been driven over. So I'm not gonna do streaks on this one because that's actually kind of hard to do. You have to experiment with that, and I would encourage you guys to do that. But to do streaks, because streets get driven on, right, directionally. So the line is here. So arguably cars would be driving over the street like this. And it's notable, if you're going to do streaks to make it look like cars have repeatedly driven over a certain section of street, then you want to measure out the spacing of the wheelbase. Like most vehicles are roughly 8 feet, 6 to 8 feet wide. And so your wheelbases are going to be 5 to 7 feet wide. And so on 1/12 scale, that's going to be 5 to 7 inches apart. And, cars swerve. So you want, where the center of the car is going to be, you want to go like 3 inches over and 3 inches over, and then kind of make these wide scrapes in those areas and then fade them toward one another, right? So I'll show you kind of what I'm talking about. And this is something I would normally do before I added the washes. So, but we're just we're teaching on this one piece here today. So I'm going to break a little bit of my own rules, but I'm just going to get very, very little paint on this brush, just very little. We don't want to do a hard dry brush. And I'm just going to go like this. Like that's almost probably even too much, but we can fix that later. And just go like this to give the indication that the street has been driven on, because streets get lighter in color as they get driven on. As the sun's UV rays hit them, you might have to go outside and look at your own street. But it seems counterintuitive because like the material is getting pressed down. You think, oh, it's getting denser, so it's getting darker. No, it's the opposite. It actually gets lighter. So we'll just give the indication of traffic here, basically. So the more you add layers together, like even though I'm doing this after I did weathering, it's fine, because in real life you're going to have them drive over weathering and weathering before people drove over it, and it's just the layers of things are going to add up. So You can go back and forth. You can do this, let this dry, come back tomorrow, add another layer of wash. Let that dry, come back tomorrow, add another layer of streaks. You know, whatever you want to do. But adding more and more and more and more subtle layers of different indications of things, not direct evidence of things, but indications of things, starts to lean the piece into that hyper-realism, right? See what that looks like in camera if I need to readjust. Yeah, it still looks pretty dark in camera. It's much lighter in real life, but give me a sec. And also, sometimes I do quick streaks like this. I do a little bit of both. All right, let me see if you guys can see that. There you go. You see the indication of the lines there? There's still some wet spots from our washes here, but it starts to look like the car's been driven on. And if you look straight down, they can seem kind of obvious, but once you go at an angle, it starts to look less obvious. And you can see there's light gray here, there's light gray here, there's undulation. It makes it look like this has been worn down and it's up and then worn back down, like cars have just constantly driven over the street here. So again, these are very subtle indications of things, and you might think they don't stand out as much as you would think, but once again, you take it out in a natural light, you take it in front of a camera, you take a picture, it'll look like real street. It really, really will. You know, if you go straight down like this, it might not look as much because your dry brush lines will be slightly more obvious. And again, that comes with practice. I'm doing this quickly for demonstration purposes, but if you go really, really heavy with the dry brushing, it looks less real, right? Steve Morrow says he can hear the traffic. Excellent. I was going to do a police siren whistle, but my lips are too dry because I've been talking too much. I'm a blabbermouth. All right, so you see there how real that starts to look? It's the same method I did on these. I did a little bit less weathering on these just to make them a little bit brighter, but you can do multiples of these and stack them up next to each other, and the breaks in the cork will look like natural breaks in the asphalt as long as you don't have too many straight lines. If you have millions of straight breaks, then it might look fake. But if you have just some straight breaks, like you do wider pieces and then you abut them, it's going to look like a normal street, right? Those imperfections that you might think, oh no, that doesn't look real, actually makes it look more real, right? So even though this one is painted different at a different time with less or more weathering, when I do this and I angle them, it looks real. The variation makes the street look more real. You want those subtle variations. That's how you get realism out of stuff, is if you make, even like with concrete like this, we'll do a video on concrete eventually. If you want to see how I paint concrete like this, I already have that video up. But the carving and the modeling, I see a lot of people when they first start out with dioramas, they want their texture to be consistent. They go, if I hit it with a rock or do the aluminum foil ball thing here, I have to do it all over the whole piece. In my opinion, when you do that, it starts to be very obvious that it's not real. And you might want that look. You may be wanting things to look a certain way with a certain figure, so by all means. But if you want it to look more hyper real, inconsistent texture and very subtle texture is the key. So there's indications of indentions here and here, some little breakages here. Tell a story. You know, the car drove up on here and broke off these pieces here, and so you see the gray concrete underneath the red paint. And the car's wheels pushed up against here when it parked, so you see the black from the rubber coming off. And there's little indications and dents here where somebody dropped something out of a window and then it's getting walked over and then the water's run down, you know. But all this perfectly hard, consistent weathering doesn't make it look real. It makes it look like you put perfectly hard, consistent weathering on it. So it's just something to be aware of if you're trying to go the hyper-real route. And I understand some people aren't. Some people are trying to make the diorama be this sort of right off the television screen. Like if you're making a Ninja Turtles diorama that you want it to look just like the sewer from the cartoon, you don't necessarily want it to look real with the figure because the figure will then look out of place in the diorama. So take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt and in context for what you want to do. But this is how I do a lot of my pieces. I go with subtlety and less texture, more layers of paint. Those types of things will help inform a reality and make it look like you just cut it out of real life and put it in front of a camera. All right. And that's kind of the philosophy with how I approach a lot of this stuff. All right. There we go. So is there anything you guys would like to see me do on this? Because this is basically what we were doing here on this stream, is just demonstrating the basics, and we've pretty much covered them here. Is there any suggestions or things you'd like to see me do or questions you have before I close out the stream? Okay, let me put Bumblebee in there. Looks pretty good, because this is basically what I wanted to cover. Maybe we'll finish the sides, maybe I'll put this aside to do with my 5,000 subscriber giveaway, because we're giving away the first diorama we made on the live stream. When we hit the 5,000 sub mark, maybe we'll give this one away with it too. I've got stickers and t-shirts coming too that I'm going to be giving away to people that have been supporting me for a long time, and also just doing some giveaways on Instagram. If you follow me over there, that's where I post the most updates. Of course, channel members, if you're a channel member, they get access to my produced videos before anybody else, unless it's the Tiny Art Experiment. I let those artists see it, and then I pass it on to the channel members. If it's a figure unboxing, I have to release those when they're out, just so I can get them out into the universe. But channel members get that, and I give channel members all kinds of pictorial updates and things I don't share anywhere else, or either they get it first and I share it secondarily somewhere else later. But they're seeing some of the secret projects that I'm working on that no one else is aware of, that I'll hopefully be able to reveal to all of you guys maybe later in the summer or fall this year. I'm doing a lot of testing for things that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and things are working out well, so I may have something to show all of you and different offerings in my store than you may normally see from me. So anyways, let me check out the chat, see what you guys are saying real quick before I leave. Bruce says he loves the most realistic dios. Yeah, I do too. I'm a fan of trying to make things look as real or believable as possible. Bruce says he likes with dioramas, it's all with art, can be really anything you want it to be. Absolutely. And that's why I said, like, I lean towards the hyper real and I push towards that, but you may not want something to look hyper real. You might want it to look like it's got that cell shading look, or you don't want your diorama to take away from the way the figure looks, right? So maybe you want the diorama to complement the figure, so you might tone down the realism. There's all kinds of different things, that you might want to do. Mike Vale 03 says, thank you for sharing. You're welcome. Thank you for being here. Hugh 12 Studios, thanks for taking the time to do this. Absolutely, no problem. Again, and all my live streams are relevant. They're not time sensitive. You can go back and watch any of them where I go over the same things like this for different purposes. We've done water, we've done techno stuff, we've done vines now, we've done dirt, we've done whatever. There's all kinds of stuff on my channel going over all kinds of different materials and details. Let me show you before I leave a couple of those things, just so for newbies or people who are watching this video and have gotten this far and haven't hit the thumb or the subscribe yet, why not do that? But let me show you some of the other stuff that's already on my channel, which is right here. This is one of the videos that is already on my channel. You can watch me build this entire piece, start to finish. I go over, I think I covered every single thing. Yeah, I think I covered every single thing in that video. You can see how to make this. The video is entitled Space Bamboo, because this was inspired by the Luke and Grogu episodes from Mandalorian, or not Mandalorian, but Book of Boba Fett. Yeah, I make a joke about that in there. But everything in there, the step-by-step is in there. We did that, that video, or I did that. That video is available already on the channel. And, of course, we did this crazy thing live. This is OW Art Live number 4 through number 9, with a couple of shorts that I posted in between. They're all in that playlist. I go over how I did every single thing in this diorama live. It's a long watch, but it's worth it especially if you're new to dioramas, or you want to see how some of these things are done, like the texture on the tree, or the weird cubic shapes that I did, or the rock formations, or the resin. That's all over there in OW Art Live number 4 through number 9. And hold on one sec, people. There's more of my dirty table here. Hello. All right, so I got our new, well, not new, but I've had this. I finally put up this piece of art. I'm redoing my back wall here because I want to make it more art-centric. I've really stopped buying expensive things and figures like I used to, because I am trying to put all my resources and energy, especially monetary energy, into this channel for you guys and for my own future. I'd like to have that creative future that I've always wanted, and I'm trying to make that happen. So that only happens with you guys being here, you guys liking this video, subbing to the channel, and any support is appreciated. Thank you so much for that super chat. I appreciate that, guys. Thank you for the likes and the thumbs up. And yeah, I try to answer questions whenever you guys send them to me in DM or on a video. I try to answer them as clearly and as quickly as I can. And yeah, there's now, again, there's links below. If there's anything in this video that you'd like to get that you don't know where to get locally, you can get it on Amazon. I put the links below. It is an affiliate link. I'm going ahead and doing that thing now, just because I realize there's a lot of people who don't have access to some of the places that I have access to. So yeah, you guys can get that there. There's I went back on almost all of my major videos. My Batcave #1 video, part 1 video, my I think almost every single live stream, my bamboo diorama, and put links to where you can get a lot of the stuff that I used, the actual things, not a comparable thing, but the actual thing that I used, the same tool, the same material, the same glue, the same paint, whatever. There's links to that, so you can actually get the same product that I did. Was up way too late last night searching through, trying to find the applicable things for that. So I hope that benefits all of you. And if you're new, I appreciate you for being here. I hope you guys have a good rest of your Sunday. I will be back in 2 Sundays, not next Sunday, but the one after that. And we're going to start a diorama for this guy. This Joy Toy Fear V or Fear 5 1/18 scale mech. We're going to do a jungle ruins diorama, and I wanted to theme it with Cambodian style jungle ruins, just because I think that's beautiful architecture there. Because I'm an architecture nut, and so this is what we're going to start. We're going to make this one. I don't know how many. I might do this one more flat and wide, and then just like details popping up instead of doing bottom and top. Right. I want to make this one a little bit more less daunting for myself and different style, different layout than the last one we did, because the last one we did took 4 times as long as I meant for it to. So I want to make this one a little bit more accessible and not as intense. Yeah, so that's it. Appreciate you guys for being here. If you're watching this on the replay, thank you so much. Leave a comment below if you have any questions. You guys rock. I love you. Have a good week.